Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the June Lebanon Plan Commission meeting. We will begin the meeting by calling to order. And Kelly, if you could call the roll.
Okay. Dan Bayshore.
Here.
Diane Scott.
Present.
Kevin Kurlick.
Here.
Corey Coons.
Here.
Keith Campbell.
Here.
Heather Schaller. Absent. Rebecca Stanton. Absent. And Lori Gross.
Here.
And Brian Tandy.
Oh, Brian Tandy, sorry. I was absent.
All right, so we are called to roll. First up, I have approval of the minutes, and I believe these are the minutes from the April meeting, correct? April the 15th. So I would entertain a motion on those meeting minutes.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as written.
We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. So that takes care of some of the opening business for us. I see no old business on our docket, so we will go ahead and move forward to our new business. And Mr. Ben Bontrager is going to join us for docket number 24-15. And this is a request for vacation of public right-of-way.
Good evening, commission members. We'll start off with a little quick overview of this and walk through the staff report. This is a right-of-way that has existed for some time. It's Tire Drive. If you may recall from a couple of months ago, we had a vacation of right-of-way along this same stretch of Elizaville Road. And it's just not too far south of here. So very similar situation here. This right-of-way was platted some time ago to accommodate what theoretically could have been development to the east on property that's now owned by Lebanon Schools. Since that time, as you can kind of see in this aerial photography, the right-of-way has essentially since been overtaken by the adjacent property owners and used for their private use. And it's not anticipated that right-of-way is going to be needed for any development further to the east. And so we've actually had while they're kind of happened separately, the two adjacent property owners had approached us about vacating the right-of-way that you see here in yellow. This would be the Parks property that was here up on Elizaville Road, and then the Cross property that's back here that actually has a Tire Drive address. And so what we looked at with them was what we need to accommodate as part of the vacation of the right-of-way, whether there are any utilities need to be accommodated, whether there's any access that need to be accommodated. And there's a couple things we looked at here. And one, what you see in blue here is an electric line that runs north and south through this right-of-way. And so we've talked about with the applicants that we'll need to work with Lebanon Utilities to determine an appropriate electric utility easement to secure that for that electric utility line. And then the other component that we need to look at is, as I mentioned, the Cross property, which has a Tire Drive address. They derive their access off of Elizaville Road through this right-of-way now. So as part of the vacation, there would need to be an access easement that is recorded. And I think we've talked about with the property owners, it'd be a 15-foot access easement that's recorded that would be on the south end of this right-of-way that runs kind of through here. Since that time, I've also talked to a representative of the property owner to the south, and they do desire to have access to a small barn that they have to the back of their property. And so this access agreement we talked about there would be three parties to that agreement that would include this property owner to the south as well, so they could get back to their barn through that driveway and through that access easement as well. We don't have any problem with that. So this one will be a little bit more unique. We've talked with both these property owners about rather than splitting the right-of-way in half and vacating it to the adjacent property owners, this half of the right-of-way back here would be entirely vacated to the Crosses because, as you can see, they essentially use it all already, and the school has no specific plans or need for that half of right-of-way, that 25 feet. And this front half here would be entirely vacated to the Parks, with the exception of the access easement. While it would be owned by the Parks, there would be access provided to all three property owners through that access easement. So again, in terms of review with TAC, I think really the only question that came up was securing the utility easement for the electric utility lines. No other TAC members had any comments regarding the vacation, didn't have any issue with it. This is just kind of walk through the process. The Plan Commission is the first step in a multi-step process. The Common Council is the one who actually will approve or consider the vacation ordinance. So the Plan Commission's role here is to provide a recommendation to the council on that vacation ordinance, having reviewed the development in the area, having reviewed the utilities that might be impacted and access that might be impacted. So that's what we're here to do tonight, is provide a recommendation to the council on that. So with that then, in summary, staff recommendation is in review of the submitted request for vacation of the 50-foot right-of-way. Per the exhibits, Lebanon Planning staff recommends forwarding this vacation request to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation, subject to the following, and I have one condition on here. We'll add the second condition. The first condition is that the applicant record a utility easement as determined by coordination with Lebanon Utilities, simultaneously with the recording of the vacation ordinance documents. And the second one would be that the applicants record a 15-foot access easement on that front portion of the property to provide access to all three parties that are directly adjacent to that right of way. With that, I'd be happy to answer your questions, and the applicants are also here to answer questions you have any for them.
Two quick ones for me. First of all, electrical easement is currently overhead, right?
As an overhead line, yes.
Okay. And then with it being a Tire Road address, is there anything required with Postal Service, or is that?
I don't know that there
Not my
would
problem.
necessarily be. I mean, essentially it kind of becomes a private drive, and we don't want to confuse the post office by changing the address. I don't think there would be any reason we couldn't keep it as a Tire Drive address.
Okay. Random fun facts. Commission, any other questions for Ben? And would the applicant care to speak to anything? You're welcome to, not required. Perfect. So with that, we would be looking for a recommendation then on, we should probably open public hearing, huh? Yes. So I will officially open the public hearing. If you do have comment, please feel free to step to the microphone. Make sure you let us know your name for the record. Keep it to 3 minutes or less.
From the computer.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Kent Franzen. I'm an attorney at 225 West Main Street, Lebanon. I represent Leo and Addie Jane Hamke, who own the property just to the south that Ben mentioned. They've owned that house for over 30 years. And for most of that time they've owned it, the way they have accessed the rear yard of their property because of the vegetation along the northern property line is they've used that 50-foot or the southern portion of the 50-foot right-of-way. And they've just used it to circle around their house and then get back behind. And so the closing of the public right-of-way that exists is not a problem. Leo does not have any objection to vacating that portion of the public right-of-way as long as he can use the southern portion of it to get back to his property. He'd rather not have to cut down all the trees along the northern side of his property to provide a means of getting back there to mow, and he's got a mini barn back there. So the property owners to the north, the Parks have agreed to create a 15-foot easement, which they're going to create anyway for the benefit of the crosses, because the crosses need access to their property as well. So we've been, just in the last day or so, we've been talking about the terms of that easement, and I think we'll be able to reach an agreement on the terms of access. To permanent access would run with the land, both for the benefit of the future owners of the Hamke property and for the benefit of the crosses and their future owners, and Parks, because none of these people will live there forever. So I think we can get those worked out, and as long as arrangements are made for an adequate access, the Hamkes do not have any objection to closing that strip of land that was anticipated perhaps to be a road someday, but it really never was needed, and therefore it never became used as a public road, but it is a platted street of the city of Lebanon currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. Any other comments during the public hearing? Being no sudden movement, we will go ahead and close that public hearing then. Any follow-up questions from the commission? All right. Well, then I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we forward the vacation request to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation, subject to the following conditions. Ben, I need help with the second one. That they work with the utilities to record an utility easement and the 15-foot.
Yeah, and then there would be a 15-foot access easement recorded as well that benefits all three parties adjacent.
Would it make more sense rather than dictating the 15-foot, we just leave it as agreeable, or does that
Yeah,
necessarily
we don't have to
matter?
necessarily specify 15 feet. I know that's what's been discussed, but we just need to make sure that there's an access easement that's acceptable to all three parties.
Okay.
And did the utility companies say anything about needing access?
They talked about it with the applicants, and they don't need access from Elizaville Road necessarily. They can get to it from the south through the easement that runs along the backs of those properties. So they didn't see necessarily any need to have access from Elizaville here.
So then we do have the motion on the table, including both of the staff recommendations. Is that correct?
I'll second the motion.
Got a motion and a second. I think we can do an easy vote on this one. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed, please, same sign. That motion does carry. Thank you guys very much. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to our next item, which I believe is docket number 24-19. In regards to New Cold Logistics.
Thank you, Mr. Coots. This item that's before you here tonight is the first step in a multi-step annexation process that has been filed by New Cold Advanced Logistics. The property, if they want to pull up the map for you here, is located on both sides of Middle to Jamestown Road. For orientation to the north here, New Cold's existing building. My aerial photography is embarrassingly old, but New Cold sits on this property right here. The property essentially between New Cold and this site is the city's regional detention pond. This property that you see right here is owned by Ken's Foods. They have some intentions to expand to the south from their existing property. And so you're looking at the property here, about 290 acres, give or take, currently owned by M&I Riley LLC, who has given permission to New Cold to file the voluntary annexation. I do want to reiterate this is a 100% voluntary annexation. We're required by state law to put it on agendas for consideration by the council, which will take place at their meeting next Monday evening. But as part of our ordinance requirements, the first step in that process is for the Plan Commission to evaluate the annexation. Their role, the Plan Commission's role is not to evaluate the validity or the value of the annexation itself. It's really just to review our planning documents associated with the city and make a recommendation on the appropriate zoning district to assign to the property at the time of the annexation if it were adopted by the council. So that's the first step that's before you here tonight, is to evaluate the site, its location, what the planning documents say about this area, and assign a zoning classification. Now, what the ordinance would say is, absent a concept plan or absent support of the planning documents, it is most appropriate to assign a default zoning classification to that, which is, in this case, would be our R1 zoning classification, which is a residential zoning classification. In this case, we do have, obviously, as New Cold being the applicant, we do have a concept plan that would show expansion potential for New Cold Logistics onto this property, and I'll show you the concept plan here in a second. And then I can also pull up our future land use planning documents as well here in a second. So here is the property you see. There's about 290 acres. A majority of it is on the west side of Middle Jamestown Road, as you see here, and then there is a portion of it on the east side of the road here. Again, as I mentioned, it's directly south of their existing property on both sides of Middle Jamestown Road. And Middle Jamestown Road, as you know, heads to the northeast and then turns east and goes out to State Road 39 after it crosses the railroad tracks. Primary access for this site will be off of Middle Jamestown Road from State Road 39. So again, let me pull up we'll start with the comprehensive planning or future land use plan. Let me get that pulled up here. And so I want to kind of preface our entire discussion about this. This is very similar to discussions we've had historically about Steve Henke's project, Waterford, the LEAP district. And actually, this is an old land use map. I should pull up the newer one because this doesn't show the LEAP district area on it. Let me get the correct one for you. I'll pull up the internet here and get that. For those that aren't familiar, this will be our comprehensive planning website. And use and development map. And this is the actual current one now that was adopted recently by the Common Council. And so the property that is associated with this annexation is located right in here. On the east side of the road, it is shown in an industrial district. On the west side of the road, it is shown as agricultural. When we first started this process of creating this comprehensive plan and future land use map, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. One of the first discussions we had with our consultant was, should we plan land uses for the entire township for development, or should we consider what we think is most appropriate in terms of potential development opportunities over the next 5 years? And our steering committee decided that it was most appropriate because I think we anticipated there were going to be a lot of things happening, a lot of changes, that we would focus primarily on what we thought would be the best development opportunities within a 5-year period, as opposed to trying to make educated guesses on what the rest of the township may hold. In this area, what was considered was, okay, we've got the existing Lebanon Business Park that's industrial that you see kind of the majority of this area that's light purple. Where do we think there might be some expansion potential for that industrial use to the south or to the west? What was decided at that time was to primarily focus on the portion of the property that was closest to State Road 39, essentially between 39 and Middle Jamestown Road, because at that time the committee made the decision that really within a 5-year period, didn't really expect it to expand much beyond that, if at all. Certainly we know a lot of changes have happened. If I go back to the other map, we can, Ken's Foods has bought property in order to expand, and certainly this expansion is being considered. And there's a number of other things that people are evaluating. And I think as we looked at this, we weren't sure what could or might happen within that 5-year period, but felt like after 5 years we'd really reevaluate and decide really where that business park and those industrial uses might expand to in this area. And so this is we're actually in the process of updating the comprehensive plan right now. We're in the early stages of the process, but really are probably going to be looking at where we expand the developed area of the city of Lebanon if and or when additional annexations happen, and what that would look like, whether it's southwest, southwest, west, or southeast or northeast. Certainly the LEAP district is the northwest area of the city. So we will be expanding land uses further out than what you see here over the course of the next 6 to 8 months. This is coming at us now as a voluntary annexation, so we're looking to consider this now. So what we, in terms of our staff report, has evaluated is, we anticipated where we thought growth would occur over a five-year period, made some educated guesses on we thought those would be some places we were correct and other places we were wrong. But certainly now with this coming in, we need to look at what makes most sense for this property if it were to be annexed into the city. And in terms of our evaluation, in terms of what's happening in economic development in the city and additional opportunities, that it makes sense to extend the industrial zoning classification further to the south and incorporate this into the city in an industrial zoning classification similar to what is in the business park. So there's the land use map, and then I'll pull up the concept plan. And I will emphasize, this is not an approved site plan. This does not include all the required development standards or anything like this. This is really concept high level, just to say, hey, that here's after a quick evaluation of the site of what the potential could be. Once, if and or when the annexation is approved and the zoning is approved, there may or may not, this isn't even guaranteed there is a project, but this is a potential concept for the site that shows how that light industrial zoning classification might be applied to the site. If and or when a project does come to fruition, then they would obviously sit down with the city to determine what the detention requirements are, what the buffer requirements are, what the architectural standards are, and all those good things that we go through to design a site. That will also include an evaluation of the transportation network that serves the site to make sure it's adequate. And if it's not, it will have to be upgraded as part of the project. And certainly also evaluate to make sure to protect the floodplain that's in the area and also make sure there's proper detention in the area so that we're not causing any undue strain in terms of flooding on any neighboring properties. So that would all be part of the development process at the later date. But I did just want to show you that the potential that is being considered by the applicant to expand their square footage that they already have in the business park to this additional site. You can see it's primarily on the west side of the road, and then they have additional, essentially, vehicle storage on the east side of the road. Again, this is in concept form only. This may completely change and would come back to you at a later date to evaluate. But this just kind of shows the thought process in terms of extending the industrial uses further south. And again, just as a reminder, Ken's Foods is just off this map that you see right here at the top. So their expansion would take place in this area. So with what's already being proposed, we are directly adjacent to what would be the industrial area of the Lebanon Business Park with this property. So with that, we'll go to the action that's required by the Plan Commission. And so the staff has essentially summarized it here in the staff report. The applicant has submitted with the annexation application a conceptual development plan for the annexation territory that contemplates industrial uses of similar characteristics to the Lebanon Business Park, which is just north and adjacent to the subject property. The Lebanon Business Park is currently zoned light industrial. Thus, planning staff recommends that the Plan Commission recommend the light industrial zoning classification of the Common Council for the proposed annexed territory. And then that recommendation will then be forwarded to the council. They could choose to follow a recommendation. They could change it to a different zoning classification if they chose, but they will definitely take into account the recommendation of the Plan Commission at their meetings. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions from the commission? Just one point of clarification for me. Light industrial really didn't have much change in the last update, correct?
It did not. It's essentially just a transfer primarily of the standards that were in the old ordinance. So it'd be similar types of uses, not heavy industrial, not big, smokestacks, things like that. It's primarily enclosed light industrial uses and warehousing that you would see typically in the light industrial zoning classification.
Perfect. Thank you. And would the applicant like to speak? You're welcome.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the commission. Maybe just provide some more context and to show the full support of New Cold Advanced Logistics. Our team is here tonight. My name is Nick Santoro. I'm the Director of Site Selection and Business Development for New Cold. I think a couple things that we wanted to highlight. We're very excited to already be resident and neighbor in the city of Lebanon with our existing advanced food logistics campus within the Lebanon Business Park. We are live there with 100,000 pallet positions. We employ 125 Indianites. Majority of those folks come from Boone County in the city of Lebanon. We are in the process of completing our second phase there, which will be another 100,000 pallet positions, another 125 jobs. So we'll be at 250. This investment represents another almost $500 million into, we hope, the city of Lebanon to move all in our campus. Over 3 billion pounds of temperature-controlled food to grocery stores in Indiana and all over the Midwest. I'm trying to think. We talked a little bit about investment. We talked about the fact that we're already here. I think a humble request from us to allow us to continue to invest in the community and really turn the New Cold campus here into the largest, most state-of-the-art cleanest running food logistics campuses on the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions from the commission? So with that, we will go ahead and open the public hearing. So the public hearing is officially open on docket number 24-19, which is an annexation by New Cold Advanced Logistics. One wish to speak? Going once, twice, and sold just for you, Steve. So I will go ahead and close the public hearing on this docket. Any last follow-ups? Oh, would you like to speak? Feel free, come on up, yeah. I will open the public hearing back up. Closed a little premature, so we'll get her back open.
It was always a first experience for everything. I wasn't thinking this would be the night. I thought it'd be a week from tonight, but that's okay. This is a pretty important topic to quite a few of us that are here tonight. It's regarding this annexation. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Greg Buchanan. Live on 1625 West 200 South, right across the street from where this proposed annexation is to take place. And I'll be honest with you with what I'm going to go through some items here that to help you understand what it feels like, what it looks like, and how it feels from a perspective of someone who owns a house that close, who's in retirement on fixed income, and what expectations of life would be like, and hopefully when I moved here to Lebanon, Indiana, and also kind of illustrate maybe how this attacks that and destroys that thought. So let me go through and go through a few things that I itemized that I thought would be important. First one is the proposal annexation does not include any plans of commitment on how a properly buffered this area would be from the adjacent residential areas. Now think how important that is. What's the buffer going to be like? When this thing was going down in the city of Brownsburg, the number one of the three questions that needed to be answered was, what is the buffer? And it wasn't answered. And they didn't make it in Brownsburg. They moved to Lebanon. Keep that in mind. Of course, the number one item here is the residential property in nearby areas would be subject to large decreases in property value. Who here would want to buy a house, a $500,000 house, with this complex going across the street? Recent studies I have looked up have indicated property values could decrease as much as 25% just due to the closeness of this proposal of annexation to the neighboring residents, and due to increased traffic, noise pollution, and loss of scenic views, industrial waste, and more. 25%. Just with myself and the three neighbors, you're talking about losses of almost $400,000 to $450,000 to residents, loyal residents to the Lebanon area. Sure, it sounds like a great business investment, but I didn't hear the concern for the people who are already there that don't have $400,000 just to squander away to watch this annex take place. I think everyone here also knows there is a lack of ability to handle an increased traffic in this area. Let's be honest. Already the cold storage facility plans receive in excess of 200 to 300 trucks a day. In recent development of the Hickory Cottages that will house over 1,000 new residents located on Highway 39 with more commercial action, include hotels and shops, will make for a huge amount of traffic backups. This increase in rail support also to this proposed industrial area has already significantly caused traffic issues in this area. This creates a huge risk to residents both south of the proposed annexation to fire and emergency medical care access. How important is that? I think pretty important. Currently, there's a lack of water to supply this proposed annexation. The city of Lebanon has already this year put a stop to new construction due to lack of guaranteed fresh water to the area. This has been a known problem for 20 years. And this is reasonable, is it not reasonable to say a solution to adding water to the current supply would be difficult at best and expensive to the local population? I think so. All industry zones create additional and expected risks to ground contamination. Some of this will be due to the city of Lebanon being able to properly support increase in industrial toxic waste and due to the small spillage likely to happen for such large industry operations. The additional traffic of trucks alone presents a risk of some uncontrollable land contamination. As mentioned above, but more important enough to list separately is the lack of acknowledgement and open transparent plans to deal with additional contaminants introduced into the city waste collection process due to this process annexation. I've not heard of anything. Maybe it exists, but it didn't come to me. Then there's light pollution. Light pollution is a huge issue for residential communities that surround this proposed annexation. Currently, the cold storage facility has 50 truck bays, all equipped with bright red and green lights that can clearly be seen from miles away. Combine this with the highly visible parking lights, truck lights, and building structure lights creates a huge light population that currently can light up a room in a nearby resident home. Additional annexation of the industrial park will only bring this unwanted light pollution closer into the homes of the residents in this area. And here's one that's a little bit unique to me, and that is radio frequency, in other words, called RF pollution, is a current problem now in this area due to the cold storage facility operation in the frequency range below 30 megahertz. This is a violation of the FCC Part 15 and 18 regulations that permit the operation of radio frequency devices without a required license. This interference occurs strongly between 6 to 8 megahertz range, but is noticeable well beyond the frequencies. Additions to further additional builds to this proposed annexation from the already established industrial park would likely continue expansion of this illegal radio transmissions. And then let's move on to noise pollution. Noise pollution is a huge threat with the proposed annexation. The noise extends from the excessive amounts of trucks to visit these locations. There are backup alarms on each of these vehicles, the air conditioners, the refrigerator compressors, and from an ongoing construction that frequently industrial areas have. It is the noise pollution that can contribute as much as 15% or more in neighborhood property value devaluation. 15% just based on noise.
And Mr. Buchanan, we're at 6 minutes. If you can give us some of your final thoughts, maybe.
Okay, I got a couple minutes or am I done?
Well, 3 minutes is
Okay.
the standard. So
I'm sorry, I did not realize that.
You're okay. You're okay.
Life is a learning experience every
Yep,
day.
absolutely.
Okay, well then I'll conclude. I've got other items here. I did submit this and I hope you made copies for the board to read, but there is a lot of issues that I didn't cover here since I'm out of time, but I hope you take the time to look at all parties involved. This is pretty huge and significant to a lot of people. And expansion can happen, but it needs to happen with all parties involved and considered. And I ask you that you think about that is all I can ask. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Buchanan. Any other comments from the public? So we will go ahead then and close the public hearing officially. And then Ben, did you have any thoughts for us?
Yeah, I'll address what I can now. First, we did just receive a copy of this letter earlier today, so it really wasn't in a timely fashion for us to be able to get it out to you for any time for you to review it, but we will make copies of those available. And it's probably more important we get those copies to the council for next week, as much so as it is for you guys, which you did hear a lot of So a couple things I'll just touch on, and there's concerns about buffer requirements, lighting standards, noise standards, things like that. And I'll just reiterate, and the Plan Commission heard this before, we have standards for all those things in the ordinance. They don't necessarily need to be committed as part of an annexation. So there are definitely buffer requirements that are to buffer industrial uses from residential uses, and we'll take those in consideration at a minimum with the applicant if and or when they do decide to come in with a project. And I'm pretty certain that New Coal will be happy to over buffer to make sure that everybody's happy out there. But we'll certainly work through that with them at the appropriate time. But there are buffer standards. There are light standards to make sure that there's not light pollution on neighboring properties. That doesn't mean that you don't see lights, but it does mean that it's below a certain intensity. Same with noise standards. Obviously, during the day, you're going to hear noise, but there are standards for constant and consistent noises at nighttime. So that means if somebody drops something that's loud and that's all you hear, that's not a violation of the noise ordinance. But if there's something that's running, causing loud noises that exceed our noise standards, then yes, there are some things that can be done. So there are a number of standards they would have to adhere to before they even move forward with the project there. And then just to touch on water availability just for a second, certainly there is no project until there is water available to serve it. So we're making a lot of assumptions on what may or may not be an issue. But certainly we can annex property, but until there is water available to serve it, there will not be a project that moves forward. And so we can certainly evaluate the site, evaluate the potential development of that site with them. It could even come in as a development plan to the Plan Commission for their review of the standards, in which all these lovely folks will be able to have a chance to come back to another meeting and see more details on the site design. But we wouldn't be able to release anything for construction until we've got that water availability figured out. In terms of other discussions about industrial waste and things like that, there are EPA standards that are a mile long about industrial waste and what is permitted and how to take care of it and things like that. And certainly the Lebanon Utilities treatment plant also has standards on what they can and cannot take and the levels of those materials that they can and cannot take. So depending on, I mean, certainly this is a cold storage facility. I don't think there's a lot of industrial waste that comes out of a facility like this, but if it was something else, if they didn't move forward, there are standards from the EPA and also from Lebanon Utilities regarding anything like that. And certainly the light industrial zoning district does not allow those heavy industrial users, those big, heavy chemical users anyway. So you're talking more about like assembly operations, warehousing, cold storage like you see here. There are certainly industrial facilities that have chemicals that would be considered hazardous, but there are proper methods that EPA regulates on how to take care of those and monitor those things.
And then real quick, just, as a reminder to the commission. So for this evening, the request of us is, again, simply to forward a recommendation of if it were to be annexed, what classification on the zoning that this commission would recommend.
Right.
So that's where we're at on the steps. Can you just touch quickly on next steps and what that looks like for everyone?
So just to reemphasize, the Plan Commission's role is not to decide on the annexation itself or the value or the validity of the annexation itself. It's just to evaluate the site, evaluate it based on our history in terms of development, planning documents, what it says for this area and what makes the most sense in terms of a land use, and also to consider potential concept plans like we've shown you tonight in support of what that land use and zoning classification may be. The next step would be actually next Monday night at the Common Council. That would be the first reading of the annexation ordinance, and the council is the one that ultimately makes the decision about the annexation itself and what to assign the zoning classification to that site. So the actual action in terms of the annexation itself takes place at the council. So it'll be introduced next Monday evening. That would be the first reading, and then there's a second reading that would be the follow-up meeting. I'll make sure I get the date right here. Don't want to. So it'd be the 24th and then the 8th would be the two meetings for the council related to the annexation. So certainly to follow the process, you'd want to make sure to attend those meetings as well. And if there's any information you want to get in the council's hands beforehand, make sure to get it to us about probably 3 to 5 days before the council meeting so we can make sure to get it out to them in their packets.
And then again, that's just the annexation piece itself, and that would be the voluntary bringing in the property into the city. Any details about any specific projects would come forth at a later time whenever they're presented to the city. So.
Yep, the annexation itself does not guarantee a project or the standards associated with that project. That would come at a later date in terms of the specific standards associated with landscaping, buffering, building design, lighting, all those sorts of things would be evaluated at a later date to make sure they meet all of our development standards associated with the site. So the annexation doesn't even guarantee there will be a project. That's something that gets evaluated later by both staff and the Plan Commission.
And I have a question for you. I appreciate your response to a lot of the concerns that were brought forward because you have so much expertise on all this that, it's not, you have a lot of knowledge and it helps. One thing I didn't think I heard you respond to that was mentioned was the impact on property value for the residents that live in the area. Can you speak to that?
Probably not directly. I haven't seen any specific studies that show, specific impacts. There's a variety of inputs that could change what the outputs are to that. I could probably find just as many studies that show it doesn't have an impact or increases the property values depending on what the adjacent use is. So without knowing where that data came from or what the inputs were to determine that outcome, it'd be hard for me to speak specifically to that. But certainly is it a change to the area? Certainly, because right now that's an agricultural field. So it is definitely a change. And so the responsibility of staff and the Plan Commission, if the annexation were to take place and the project moves forward, is to make sure that they meet the required standards. They've properly protected the neighbor property owners. All of the detention requirements have been met. And if there's any impacts to traffic in the area, that those are addressed at the time that development comes in as well. So we'll certainly look more specifically at potential impacts at a later date and make sure all been appropriately addressed before a project would move forward.
Any other questions from the commission?
This may be a question that you could answer. I see us bringing and annexing it in. I don't have a problem with that and the concept plans where it's at, but are you forced to, by the way the land's set, to actually put any development in that area that's there, or could it be shifted to the north, or is it set because the way the retention and the water is?
Not necessarily. I think what they're showing here is the area. Let me go ahead and wake my computer back up again. And again, this is just a concept plan.
Right, I understand.
But what they did, they have done some due diligence on the site, and what they're showing in this large blue area, if they want to pull the screen up again, this large blue area is the floodplain that exists. And in some cases, if you have the ability to avoid the floodplain, it's a lot better to.
Cost effective, I get it.
Yeah, so they've shown a way that they can develop on the site while avoiding the floodplain. There's certainly a lot of other things that could be done. Does the building need to be in that specific location? Could it go somewhere else? Absolutely. They were just showing probably the easiest path forward by avoiding the floodplain and then developing that southern portion with the appropriate attention there. But I'm sure they'll do further evaluation of the site and decide what's most appropriate. Just one thing to remember, if they do impact the floodplain or fill it at all, they have to place
Right.
3 times that volume somewhere else. So that's why it's a lot of times easier just to avoid it if you can, because there's a compensation that has to be done if it's going to be filled. So they did a quick due diligence of the site and just showed something that just with minimal impact to the floodplain. But certainly this could change, and we'll work with them to decide what's most appropriate and the standards that apply to it.
Thank you, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Any other questions from the commission? So then I believe the action we'll be looking for this evening in regards to docket number 24-19 would be to forward a recommendation to the Common Council of a specific zoning classification. And as listed in the staff report here, it was recommended as light industrial zoning. So I would entertain any motions.
I'll make a motion to forward to the Common Council light industrial zoning classification for the proposed annexed territory.
You have a motion. Do we have a second? That was a second from Keith. We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote on this one. Please, Kelly.
And Bayshore,
Yes.
Scott? Yes. Kevin Krulik? Corey Coons?
Yes.
Keith Campbell? Yes. Lori Gross?
Yes.
Good deal. Thank you very much, folks. That is docket 24-19. That one is officially in the books now. Letter C on our agenda has been moved to the July meeting. So we're going to go ahead and go to letter D, which is docket 24-21. This is the Four Star Group requesting an extension on Angelique Gardens primary plat approval.
All right, maybe just to put a bow on the last one, if anybody that's adjacent, a neighbor has any questions for me, I'll grab some of my business cards after the meeting and hand them to you. Be happy to answer any questions about process or curiosities for you. So please do that. And if anybody has any information they'd like to pass on to council, if you can get it to me sometime by midweek this week, then I'll make sure that gets to the council in their packets for the meeting on Monday. All right, final one here, Angelique Gardens. Was a standard at the time SF2 primary plat that was approved by the Plan Commission. Let me get my dates. On August 16, 2021. Since that time, we've obviously done updates to the UDO and changed zoning classification. So now the site is actually in the R3 zoning classification, which most closely represents the SF2 that it was prior. And the UDO specifies that a primary plat is valid for a period of 3 years. If there is not a secondary plat that's filed within that 3-year period, then the primary plat approval expires. This means then, because it was originally approved on August 16, 2021, that in August 2024, which is coming up pretty quickly here, their primary plat would expire. The UDO also indicates that the applicant has the ability to submit a written request to extend that approval period for a period of up to 12 months beyond the original expiration date. It actually says without further notice in public hearing, but we prefer to bring things to the Plan Commission at a public meeting. So that's what we've done here tonight. And then if there is a secondary plat that is approved, then during that additional period, then that automatically extends the effective date of the primary plat by an additional 3 years. So there are obviously a number of things that have happened over the last 3 years that has impacted this site, the schedule for development of this site. Some of the items that have delayed it are on the applicant side. Some of them are out of their control. And I'm sure they'll talk about the wetland issues that they had in there that delayed them by almost a year. And then most recently, they were intending to start construction of the site this spring, and then found out, like many others that were interested in development in the Lebanon area, that we did not have the availability of water. And for this project, the availability affected their section 2. Section 1 had availability reserved. Section 2 did not. So they had some concerns that the risk associated with that if they started with section 1 and then may or may not be able to start on section 2. So what they wanted to do then is, in anticipation of there being a solution that's discovered in the next 12 months, and we certainly hope that there is, they chose, rather than to start section 1 at risk, that they would ask for an extension of 12 months on their primary plat approval to allow for some of the things the city's working on to play out in terms of water availability. And then they could, once those are figured out and they can secure availability for their section 2, then they would move forward with construction. So with that, then, really not much additional to evaluate in terms of the staff report. They have filed the required letter requesting the extension, and staff would then recommend that the Plan Commission approve a 12-month extension of the primary plat approval for Angelique Gardens. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the commission? And do we have an applicant? Do the applicant wish to speak?
Sure. Good evening. I'm Brian Gray. I'm with Four Star, and as Ben had said, there are things that were in our control and things were not in our control. And the U.S. Supreme Court's Sackett case delayed us over a year trying to get through that process, and that affected about any project that had wetlands on it, and this project did. But we were looking to close this spring to start construction. And Four Star is very conservative when it comes to getting land and entitlements. Since we didn't have the full entitlements on the whole property, it gave us pause. So with that time from this spring to today, we were able to renegotiate our PSA, split the property with the property owner as far as our takes. So now the first take that we do will be the full first phase that's fully entitled. So that fits within what Four Star will do to make sure that we have our fully entitled project. And with fingers crossed and see how water issues go, we have a full year of construction and we've got a ways to go before we start section 2. And we will have the secondary plat for section 1 recorded next spring and plenty of time not to run into this same issue again. So do you have any questions for me?
Questions from the commission?
I have some questions. I actually live in Auburn Meadows up north. So I know that there was a deal put together with Four Star and was at the time the other developer who sold over to Lennar.
That's correct.
Are they going to abide by the same things as far as
Well,
access to the lift station and everything?
Yes, we negotiated with Lennar and we have that agreement in place. And so we have full access to the lift station. Great question.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commission? Perfect. Thank you very much. We do want to go ahead and open for public, correct? So I will open our public hearing. This is in reference to docket 24-21, Four Star Group, requesting a 12-month extension to primary plat approval. No one moved quickly to the microphone while I was saying all of those words. Going once, twice. All right, so we'll go ahead and close that public hearing as well. So we've got the public hearing closed. So I would entertain a motion unless anyone has any follow-ups for Ben on docket 24-21.
I had a motion that we recommend the approval for the 12-month extension as requested.
So we've got a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Oh,
Second.
just to,
Maybe just to clarify that motion, it's not a recommendation. It's just you would be
It's approval,
approving the
sorry.
extension. Yeah.
Thank you.
so the motion would be to approve the 12-month extension on the primary plat. And then Lori, do you still second? Perfect. So we do have a motion and a second. We'll try this the easy way. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry as well. That is all of the business that I show on our agenda. Ben, you got anything additional for us? Perfect. So in that case, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. We've got a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? And a second. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? No one's opposed. We are adjourned. We will see you at the next scheduled Plan Commission meeting.